The email didn't explain much at first. It just said, basements remember things people try to forget. The sender mentioned they'd watched horror videos for years without ever feeling the need to share their own experience. But this one, they said, had never really ended for them. They grew up in a small town where nearly every house had a basement. It was normal. Their family's house was old but well kept, built in the late 1940s. The basement was unfinished. Concrete floor, exposed beams, a single hanging bulb in the center. That bulb was the only thing keeping the darkness from fully settling in. As a kid, they hated going down there. Not because of monsters or stories, but because it felt wrong. The air was colder than it should have been, even in summer. Sounds behaved strangely, like footsteps echoed longer than they should. When they were 15, their parents started sending them down to do laundry. At first they rushed, in and out, lights always on. One night, while waiting for the dryer, they heard movement behind the furnace. Not a bang or scrape, breathing, slow, controlled, too steady to be an animal. They stood frozen, staring into the darkness beyond the furnace. The breathing stopped the moment they focused on it. They told themselves it was pipes, old house noises, but the feeling of being watched didn't go away. Over the next few weeks, things escalated. Items moved. Laundry baskets weren't where they'd left them. Once, they found muddy footprints near the drain, leading toward the wall, then stopping abruptly. They asked their parents. They brushed it off. One night, they forgot a sock in the dryer and went back down alone. Halfway down the stairs, the basement light turned off. They hadn't touched the switch. The darkness swallowed the bottom of the staircase. And from that darkness, a voice whispered their name. Not shouted, not growled, whispered, like someone standing inches from their ear. They ran back upstairs screaming. Their parents searched the basement. Nothing. A week later, while their parents were out, they heard something heavy being dragged across the basement floor. Against their better judgment, they listened from the top of the stairs. The dragging stopped directly beneath them. Then something began climbing the stairs. Slowly, one step at a time. They slammed the door and held it shut until their parents returned. Years later, when the house was sold, the new owners found a sealed crawl space behind the furnace. Inside were blankets, empty food containers, and a makeshift bed. Someone had been living there, and no one ever figured out how long. The second story came from someone who said they never believed in bad places until they rented one. They'd moved into a basement apartment beneath an older couple's house. It was cheap, quiet, and newly renovated. White walls, new carpet, too clean for something that old. The landlord mentioned one rule during the walkthrough. Don't touch the locked storage room. It was a metal door at the end of the hallway, no handle on the outside, just a keyhole. They agreed without question. The first month was uneventful. Then the sounds started. Every night around 2 a.m., something would knock from the other side of the storage door. 3 slow knocks. Knock, knock, knock. They texted the landlord, no response. One night they knocked back. The knocking stopped instantly. The next morning there were scratches around the keyhole. Fresh. They demanded answers. The landlord finally admitted the previous tenant had died down there. Suicide, they said, locked themselves inside the storage room. The sender tried to move out. The landlord begged them to stay. That night, the knocking turned into pounding. The door rattled violently as if someone was throwing their body against it. And then a voice spoke through the metal. You answered me. The sender left everything behind and ran. 2 weeks later, they learned the landlord had boarded up the entire basement. The third story came from a contractor. He specialized in restoring older homes. One job took him to a farmhouse in the middle of nowhere. The owners complained about smells coming from the basement. When he opened the basement door, the smell hit him immediately. Rotting wood, mold, something else. Halfway through the cleanup, he noticed a second staircase hidden behind shelving. It led deeper underground. The stairs ended in a dirt room. No lights, no wiring, but there were chains bolted into the walls and scratch marks on the floor. As he turned to leave, he heard movement behind him. A soft shuffle. Someone whispered, "Don't go." He ran. Later, police found evidence the previous owner had been using the space for something far worse. The last story was short, but it stayed with him the longest. A woman wrote that she used to play hide and seek in her grandmother's basement. One day she hid behind a stack of boxes and felt someone crawl in beside her. She laughed, thinking it was her cousin. The breathing was wrong. She turned and realized she was alone in the basement. Years later, she learned her grandmother had lost a child there. And sometimes basements don't forget. They wait.